Hello, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us back again, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. Dr. Roberts, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
You're welcome, Greg. Pleased to be with you.
Well, I wanted to get with you about your most recent article, "Role Reversal: How the U.S. Became the USSR." And I know this isn't in your article, and I know you're going to be writing about it. But my peg came when this bubbled out about former President Jimmy Carter last week in Der Spiegel, and I think RT America and some other places picked it up. Last week, Jimmy Carter said America has no functioning democracy at this moment. This is a former Democratic president talking about how America is being run by a current Democratic president. And he's talking about the NSA spying program and Edward Snowden, the leaker, who did a big service to America. And you're saying that we're, not only do we not have a functioning democracy, in your latest piece, how the U.S. became the USSR, it's worse than that.
Yes. It's much worse than that. In fact, we can say, Greg, that the country is not being run by the president. It's being run by the spy agencies and by the private interest groups, Wall Street, the Israel lobby, the military security complex, agribusiness, Monsanto, and the oil, timber, and mining industries. They run the country. The president is a puppet, a figurehead. This wasn't exactly true when Carter was there. But, Jimmy Carter was an outsider like Ronald Reagan. He challenged the establishment of the Democratic Party like Reagan's challenged the establishment of the Republican Party. And this made the establishments angry. So the first thing they did to Carter was to eliminate his budget director. They eliminated all the Carter's people. They framed up Burt Lance on some phony banking charges and got Carter's budget director out, so Carter no longer had any control over the budget. They framed up Carter's chief of staff of the White House, Hamilton Jordan. They claimed he spit alcohol or something down a woman's cleavage. And this, of course, didn't happen, but all the feminists at the Washington Post went berserk, and so they got rid of the chief of staff. This is what the establishment always does to outsiders. They tried it on Reagan. You may remember they got rid of Reagan's national security advisor twice. And they tried to get rid of other of us. So the president doesn't run the country. Now, but during Carter's time, it would never have occurred to Carter or Reagan to say that they had the right to put Americans in jail indefinitely without due process.
You're talking about the NDAA, the Indefinite Detention Clause in the National Defense Authorization Act.
That's right. And they never would have said that they had the right to assassinate American citizens without due process, without evidence to a court. In fact, you might remember how much trouble Nixon got into because he spied on a very few people, a couple of handful, and he was seen to be the greatest tyrant since Adolf Hitler. So now we have a president that spies on everybody, not just everybody in the United States, but everybody in the world. and they tell us, oh, this is to make you safe. In other words, you're safe by being in a police state. So why didn't we leave Hitler alone? The Germans were safe. They were in a police state. So, look, Well, go ahead. Ask your question.
Well, you spent time over in East Germany, and basically you bring up the fact that the Russians put up the Iron Curtain, the Berlin Wall, and the Iron Curtain came down, and the Berlin Wall was used as a big club to beat the Russians over the head with about how they didn't have freedom there, and they didn't have democracy, and they erect this wall, separating East and West Germany. That's gone now, and that the U.S. and the West just beat the Russians over the head about their undemocratic and tyrannical policies, and they used the wall. I think some people were sad to see it come down, and they used the wall separating East and West Germany as a club to beat them over the head with. They took advantage. This is in your article.
I was in the Soviet Union as an exchange student the summer that they began building the Berlin Wall, and I was only in East Germany a short time because we were leaving to come back to the West, but the wall was being built, and so we got into East Germany a ways, and they stopped us and sent us back to Poland. There wasn't any rail track left for passenger trains because all the Soviet troops and tanks were moving through in case the West made any resistance to the wall, which was fortunately the West didn't make, and so war was aborted. But the whole point of this article, Greg, is that in those days it was the Soviets who had Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. And we were saying, let them go. They had Cardinal Joseph Menzinti, who was the leader of the Hungarian Catholic Church. He was a great opponent of tyranny, so the Nazis had imprisoned him. And then when the commies came in, they found him to be an undesirable person as well, and so they tortured him, and in 1949 gave him a life sentence. Well, the Hungarian Revolution in 1956 was a short-lived revolution, but it lasted long enough to free the cardinal, and he made it to the American embassy in Budapest, and they asked Washington for political asylum, and they granted political asylum to the cardinal. But the commies wouldn't give him free passage, just like we won't allow the British to give Julian Assange free passage. We won't allow the airlines of the world to carry Snowden to the political asylum that he's been granted in South America. So the reversal of the roles has occurred. Now it's the Americans who have who won't let Cardinal Menzinti leave and accept his political asylum. This is an astonishing thing to happen in one lifetime.
It's quite a turnaround.
It's astonishing.
As a member of the press, you have you can't call this partisan. You have Jimmy Carter, a Democratic president, saying that America has no functioning democracy. And this happened last week, and that's not on CNN, that's not on MSNBC, that's not on Fox News, that's not on any. I mean, what do you think's going on? Why do you think this is too stupid to be stupid. I don't know of any president in modern history has ever said that the United States has no functioning democracy, and pointed out the NSA, massive NSA spying program and PRISM and all that as his example as why we don't have functioning democracy. So why isn't this on every network and on the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox News, Bloomberg? Why isn't this, wow, that's a statement?
Well, the reason it's not is that it contradicts the propaganda that we use to justify our lawlessness. You see, of all the countries in the world, there are only two that are lawless. One is Israel and the other is the United States. Neither country obeys even the domestic law, much less international law.
Well,
so the way we get away...
We have some terrorist states. I mean, we do have Hezbollah, we have Hamas, we have, Iran.
No, we don't have any terrorist states, and Iran certainly is not a terrorist state. there are some organizations that we find it convenient from time to time to brand as terrorists.
Hamas,
Many of them,
Hezbollah.
Many of them we created. And Hezbollah is only recently branded that its military arm by the EU. And that's because they interfered with the EU's ability to arm the Al-Qaeda rebels in Syria. So it doesn't mean anything other than it shows what punks and puppets the European governments are. But to get back to the subject, if you're a lawless state, which the United States is, there's no international law it obeys. It doesn't obey the Geneva Conventions. It doesn't obey its own statutory law. It tortures people. It doesn't obey the Constitution. It doesn't obey anything. It just does what it wants. And so how it gets away with it, it pretends, oh, we've got this great democracy. We are what is the term they use? Not the chosen people. The indispensable. We are the indispensable people. And we are taking our ways to the whole world. And so they can't say anything against the democracy here because it's the cover for the lawlessness. And that's the reason. Now, of course, the other reason is there's no media. The media was concentrated in the last few years of the Clinton administration. 5 firms now own what used to be a large, dispersed, independent media. They're now owned by 5 mega companies, and nobody can open their mouth. They get fired. The editors get fired. The reporters get fired. And what they do, they become a propaganda ministry. There isn't any such thing as an American media, not print or TV. It's a propaganda ministry for the government and the corporations. So that's the answer to your question. If you're a lawless state, you disguise yourself as a democracy.
And what's the end game here? Why are they doing that? Is it because, Wilbur Ross was on yesterday, and he was talking about how a billionaire investor, multimillionaire anyway. I think he's good for $1 billion. But anyway, Wilbur Ross, a very rich investor, is on CNBC and bubbles out of his mouth, wow, if all we have is $85 billion a month propping up the economy, we're in trouble. And nobody said anything, of course. And is that what the end game is with all this? They know it's going to crash. They know the economy is going to blow up. And I don't mean to be doom and gloom in here. I just don't see a way this works out in a happy fashion. Do you?
I think,
what's the end game?
I think the reason that they want to be unaccountable and exercise power is it goes back to the Cold War. And it's just team, and they're just absolutely determined that their team wins. They get very upset if their team doesn't win. So that's the way the American Cold Warriors were, because they couldn't win because the Soviet Union was there. And they had all these massive nuclear weapons, and they could stand us off. And so we couldn't win, and people were mad, they were frustrated, they wanted to win, they wanted to kill the quarterback, they wanted to get rid of the people in their way of being supreme. And once the Soviet Union collapsed, they had a chance to do that, and it's just been growing. You see all these neocon documents, that they have printed and published about how now we can seize the world, now we can take hegemony over the world. And they just want to dominate and prevail. And that's what drives it. There's no longer a check to it. The relative power of Russia is not like the Soviet Union. China hasn't yet risen up militarily to the height it has economically. And so it's an open field for the American Cold Warriors, or their heirs, the remnants and heirs, particularly the neocons, to prevail over the world. That's what they want to do. They're just driven by having to prevail, just like a British soccer team. Well, their fans, how their fans want to drive the others into the ground, just like, you see in American sports. I remember reading a year or two ago, one of the professional football teams, the coach was paying bonuses to players who injured the players of the other team.
That happened in the NFL as well, right?
Yeah.
But I want to get to the economy. I mean, are they freaking out about some sort of collapse or some sort of engineered collapse or something in the economy?
Well, they may be.
Huh?
They may be, but that's not the reason for this lust for power. It's a lust for power. It was blocked for decades by the power of the Soviet Union, the military power, and it's not blocked now. And so they really have a lust for power. It's what's driving it. I don't think anybody in Washington much is very aware of the dire economic situation. It may be dawning on the Federal Reserve. If you think about it in terms of standard economics, we've had the largest budget deficits, the most expansionary monetary policy in the history of the country. It's had no effect on the economy. And it's been going on now for, 4 years or longer, 5 maybe. And it used to be you could run it for 6 or 9 months and the economy came back. Well, they've been running it for 4 or 5 years and the economy is sinking further. So I think it's starting to dawn on the Fed that things probably aren't right and that they may not be able to bring the system back. But this is a separate problem.
But let me ask you this: though. It's a separate problem, but they may cross paths. And that is, if the economy crashes, then we've already got a police state to keep everybody in check. Then, right? Is that?
Well, it would be useful if there are riots and.
I mean, people are going to lose a lot of money in this upcoming crash. I mean, the gold.
Whatever's left will be lost.
Gold is being taken out of the vaults of J.P. Morgan and COMEX and LBMA. There's all kinds of reports. The exchange-traded funds, the ETFs, SLV and GLD, all kinds of reports out there about how they're being drained of the physical metal in them. We have an end game going on, don't we? Don't we have some kind of a crash coming, a kind of a Detroit moment?
I think the end game is on many fronts, and you're right. There's one on the economic front. My prediction or expectation is that by winter, the second downturn of the Great Recession will be in place. Unemployment will explode, joblessness, more foreclosures. It's going to be worse than the Great Depression. But also, we have this unchecked, unleashed power. I don't know if you're aware, but Washington has recently rewritten the nuclear posture. We now have, we use nuclear weapons only, to prevent war as a standoff. Now they're first use, and we've declared that we'll use them against anybody, whether they're nuclear armed or not. There's been a posture paper written that now that the Russians are relatively weak and the Chinese have not done much military modernization, that the United States has the power to annihilate both countries without any risk. We can attack them both with nuclear weapons and they won't be able to respond, and we can achieve world hegemony. This is the type of stuff that they're writing in Washington. And just as no one knows what Jimmy Carter says, no one knows that this is what the military planners are writing. And so if you want to look in general, it goes far beyond the economy. I mean, they're saying we can now win a nuclear war. And so wherever you look, Greg, is mindlessness, danger, and no reporting. Other than people like yourself who do it online, but no reporting in the TV or print media.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, for coming on and explaining your role reversal argument that you just put on your site, your paulcraigroberts.org website, which I'll link to. It, again, is a role reversal, how the U.S. became the USSR. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. You're a great American. Thank you so much.
Pleased to talk to you, Greg.